It's soon done." But it was not soon done either. It lay in the usual place, the carrier's dreadnought pocket, with the little pouch, her own work, from which she was used to fill it. But her hand shook so that she entangled it, and yet her hand was small enough to have come out easily, I'm sure, and bungled terribly. The filling of the pipe and lighting it, those little offices, in which I have commended her discretion, were vilely done from first to last. During the whole ceremony, Tackleton stood looking on maliciously with a half-closed eye, which, whenever it met hers, or caught it, for it can hardly be said to have ever met another eye, rather being a kind of trap to snatch it up, augmented her confusion in a most remarkable degree. "Why, what a clumsy dot you are this afternoon!" said John. "I could have done it better myself, I verily believe." With these good-natured words he strode away, and presently was heard in company with Boxer and the old horse and the cart, making lively music down the road. What time the dreamy Caleb still stood, watching his blind daughter, with the same expression on his face. "Bertha," said Caleb softly, "what has happened? How changed you are, my darling! In a few hours since this morning, you, silent and dull all day. What is it? Tell me." "Oh, father, father!" cried the blind girl, bursting into tears. "Oh, my hard, hard fate!" Caleb drew his hand across his eyes before he answered her. "But think how cheerful and happy you have been, Bertha! How good, and how much loved by many people!" "That always strikes me to the heart, dear father. Always so mindful of me, always so kind to me." Caleb was very much perplexed to understand her. "To be blind, Bertha, my poor dear," he faltered, "is a great affliction, but—" "I have never felt it!" cried the blind girl. "I have never felt it in its fullness. Never! I have sometimes wished that I could see you, or could see him. Only once, dear father, only for one little minute, that I might know what it is that I treasure up." She laid her hands upon her breast. "And hold here, that I might be sure that I have it right. And sometimes, but when I was a child, I have wept in my prayers at night to think that, when your images ascend from my heart to heaven, they might not be the true resemblances of yourselves. But I have never had these feelings long. They have passed away and left me tranquil and contented." "And they will again," said Caleb. "But, father, oh, my good gentle father, bear with me if I am wicked," said the blind girl. "This is not the sorrow that so weighs me down." Her father could not choose but let his moist eyes overflow, she was so earnest and pathetic. But he did not understand her yet. "Bring her to me," said Bertha. "I cannot hold it close and shut within myself. Bring her to me, father." She knew he hesitated, and said, "May! Bring May!" May heard the mention of her name, and coming quietly towards her, touched her on the arm. The blind girl turned immediately and held her by both hands. "Look into my face, dear heart, sweet heart," said Bertha. "Read it with your beautiful eyes, and tell me if the truth is written on it." "Yes, Bertha, yes." The blind girl, still upturning the blank, sightless face, down which the tears were coursing fast, addressed her in these words: "There is not in my soul a wish or thought that is not for your good, bright May. There is not in my soul a grateful recollection stronger than the deep remembrance which is stored there of the many, many times when, in the full pride of sight and beauty, you have had consideration for blind Bertha, even when we two were children, or when Bertha was as much a child as ever blindness can be. Every blessing on your head, light upon your happy course. Not the less, my dear May," and she drew towards her in a closer grasp, "not the less, my bird, because today the knowledge that you are to be his wife has wrung my heart almost to breaking. Father, May, Mary, oh, forgive me that it is so, for the sake of all he has done to relieve the weariness of my dark life, and for the sake of the belief that you have in me, when I call heaven to witness that I could not wish him married to a wife more worthy of his goodness." While speaking, she had released May Fielding's hands and clasped her garments in an attitude of mingled supplication and love. Sinking lower and lower down as she proceeded in her strange confession, she dropped at last at the feet of her friend, and hid her blind face in the folds of her dress. "Great power!" exclaimed her father, smitten at one blow with the truth. "Have I deceived her from the cradle, but to break her heart at last?" It was well for all of them that Dot, that beaming, useful, busy little Dot, for such she was, whatever faults she had, and however you may learn to hate her in good time, it was well for all of them, I say, that she was there. Or where this would have ended, it were hard to tell. But Dot, recovering her self-possession, interposed before May could reply, or Caleb say another word. "Come, come, dear Bertha, come away with me. Give her your arm, May. So. How composed she is, you see, already, and how good it is of her to mind us," said the cheery little woman, kissing her upon the forehead. "Come away, dear Bertha, come, and here's a good father will come with her, won't you, Caleb, to be sure?" Well, well, she was a noble little Dot in such things, and it must have been an obdurate nature that could have withstood her influence. When she had got poor Caleb and his Bertha away, that they might comfort and console one another, as she knew they only could, she presently came bouncing back, the saying is as fresh as any daisy. I say fresher, to mount guard over that bridling little piece of consequence in the cap and gloves, and prevent the dear old creature from making discoveries. "So bring me the precious baby, Tilly," she said, drawing a chair to the fire. "And while I have it here in my lap, here's Mrs. Fielding, Tilly, who will tell me all about the management of babies, and put me right in 20 points where I'm as wrong as can be. Won't you, Mrs. Fielding?" Not even the Welsh giant, who, according to the popular expression, was so slow as to perform a fatal surgical operation upon himself in emulation of a juggling trick achieved by his arch enemy at breakfast time, not even he fell half so readily into the snare prepared for him as the old lady into this artful pitfall. The fact that Tackleton having walked out, and furthermore, of 2 or 3 people having been talking together at a distance for 2 minutes, leaving her on her own resources, was quite enough to have put her on her dignity. And the bewailment of that mysterious convulsion in the indigo trade for 24 hours. But this becoming deference to her experience on the part of the young mother was so irresistible that after a short affectation of humility she began to enlighten her with the best grace in the world, and sitting bolt upright before the wicked Dot, she did in half an hour deliver more infallible domestic recipes and precepts than would, if acted upon, have utterly destroyed and done up that young Peerybingle, though he had been an infant Samson. To change the theme, Dot did a little needlework. She carried the contents of a whole work-box in her pocket. However she contrived it, I don't know. Then did a little nursing, then a little more needlework, then had a little whispering chat with May while the old lady dozed, and so in little bits of bustle, which was quite her manner always, found it a very short afternoon. Then, as it grew dark, and as it was a solemn part of this institution of the picnic that she should perform all Bertha's household tasks, she trimmed the fire, and swept the hearth, and set the tea-board out, and drew the curtains, and lighted the candle. Then she played an air or two on a rude kind of harp which Caleb had contrived for Bertha, and played them very well, for nature had made her delicate little ear as choice a one for music as it would have been for jewels, if she had had any to wear. By this time it was the established hour for having tea, and Tackleton came back again to share the meal and spend the evening. Caleb and Bertha had returned some time before, and Caleb had sat down to do his afternoon's work. But he couldn't settle to it, poor fellow, being anxious and remorseful for his daughter. It was touching to see him sitting idle on his working stool, regarding her so wistfully, and always saying in his face, "Have I deceived her from the cradle but to break her heart?" Then it was night, and tea was done, and Dot had nothing more to do in washing up the cups and saucers. In a word, for I must come to it, and there's no use putting it off, when the time drew nigh for expecting the carrier's return in every sound of distant wheels, her manner changed again.